This is Keys to the Shop, Founder Friday edition, an encore episode of an interview with Kathy Turiano of Joe Bean Roasters. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I am your host for the show, and I'm really excited to have you along today as we go all the way back to January of 2018. Back in the old days, episode 43, we had a great conversation with Kathy Turiano of Joe Bean Coffee Roasters, and I'm excited to reshare that with you today. I know there's a lot of episodes of Keys to the Shop that you have to comb through, and sometimes it's good to be reminded about some of these great conversations, and so I hope you enjoy this. Now, if you would take the opportunity right now to hit subscribe wherever you happen to be listening to this show right now, make sure and just check that you are subscribed to Keys to the Shop. That way you'll always be updated with new episodes come out. And then also, if you would share these episodes with a friend, that would be amazing as well. Sharing these episodes really helps the show. Rating and reviewing also is great too. So thank you to all of you. We finally made it over 200 reviews on iTunes or / Apple Podcast, as they're calling it now. So thanks everybody for doing that. It really means a lot to me. Now, on top of the podcast, Keys to the Shop also does consulting. That's right. Keys to the Shop Consulting is where I get to work directly with you to help you establish your cafe the right way, right from the beginning, avoiding needless mistakes and building a solid foundation that's sustainable. Or if you're already an operator and you want to improve your cafe, you want to have an assessment done, you want to just have one-on-one coaching and consultation, there are a lot of ways that Keys to the Shop Consulting can work with you to accomplish these things. I would love to have a conversation. Just email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. We'll set up a free discovery call and talk about what's going on in your world and how Keys to the Shop Consulting can help. Again, the email for Keys to the Shop Consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, today's episode is brought to you by the Ground Control Cyclops Brewer from Voga Coffee. Now, the Ground Control Brewer is basically taking all of the potential that's been left on the table by traditional batch brewers and bringing it to the forefront. Giving you ultimate control over the extraction of your coffee means breathing new life into the flavors that your coffee can offer your customers. It's all thanks to the SCA award-winning technology in the Ground Control Brewer, and it's not just a next-level batch brewer. It also makes tea, batched iced lattes, batch cold brew, so the efficiency and workflow and productivity of your bar also goes up with your quality standard when you're using a ground control. Check them out over at groundcontrol.coffee for more information. And if you're looking to offer your customers the absolute best expression of your coffee and bring more versatility and efficiency to your bar, then I think you need to look into getting a Ground Control Cyclops brewer for your cafe. Again, for more information, visit them over at groundcontrol.coffee. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Barista series from Pacific. This is the line of plant-based performance beverages that are designed for professional baristas, and they are tested by some of the world's best baristas to make sure that whatever you use from their extensive lineup is going to actually perform on bar. It's going to stand up to the heat from steaming, produce amazing silky texture, great for latte art, and also it's going to balance in the cup. It's going to have this balance that allows the coffee to be the star of the beverage because they, like you, want your customers to have an amazing specialty coffee experience. So go to their website, pacificfoodservice.com, get samples in your store, try it for yourself. If you want to serve your customers the best plant-based beverages, I think you really do need to be using the Barista series from Pacific. Okay, everyone, like I said, today we're going to be doing an encore episode with Kathy Turiano, the co-founder and co-owner of Joe Bean Roasters. When we put this episode out before, it was Joe Bean Coffee Roasters. And in this conversation, this was the first conversation we had with Kathy. We had another follow-up during the COVID-19 right in 2020 as they made some changes to their business. But what you'll find about this conversation is that change is the theme with their company, taking bold action to adjust what they were doing to make sure that they were not only serving their community well and serving great quality products, but they were staying true to their values and vision all along the way, even when it seems scary. And Cathy has always been sort of a go-to example for me when talking with people in the industry about taking these types of steps that in the end turn out to be for the better, but in the moment they seem a little risky. Joe Bean started in 2005 when Cathy and her friend Dina Jones founded the business out of a kindred love for community and an affinity for coffee. And over time, their business journey led them to, as I said, radically shift their initial coffee shop model to a full coffee bar, kitchen, and roastery. Joe Bean is responsible for the flourishing of specialty coffee in the Rochester area. In upstate New York, they are one of the foundational coffee roasters. When you think about quality, they have won multiple Good Food Awards for their coffee, Golden Bean Award, and have been featured on Sprudge, Food and Wine, Imbibe, Fresh Cup Magazine, and more. So for these nearly 20 years, they've made quite a name for themselves, all the while changing a ton about what they do. I do hope you take time to listen to episode 207, Hope in Difficult Times, with Cathy. She came back to the show to talk about all the changes since episode 43, the one you're listening to today, that has happened to Joe Bean, the move away from their coffee bar and food programs into a way more simple model that's way more family-run, roastery, wholesale subscriptions. And since 2020, that model has been working wonderfully for them. And the reason why I want to share this with you today is because I think it's a good reminder, as we've talked about on the show this last shift break yesterday, talking about the turning radius of your business and when you want to initiate change. This week, as you're listening to this podcast, I will be in Chicago at Coffee Fest. You'll hear Cathy talk about how they had their initial realization for the first radical change they made in their business. But it's not uncommon for people at Coffee Fest and other places to be at this crossroads where they have to make decisions. And when you've got someone who's as kind and wise as Cathy talking to you about her business, I think you really need to stop and listen again. And so here we are. Let's get right to it. Here now is an encore episode of episode 43 of Keys to the Shop with Kathy Turiano of Joe Bean Roasters. Cathy, how are you? Welcome to Keys to the Shop.
Oh, I'm really good. Thanks for having me, Chris. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, no, pleasure's all mine. I remember way back in like 2013 being at a throwdown in your location in Rochester, meeting you all, just experiencing your great service and great coffee. That was a sweet time.
It was a really sweet time. Actually, you were a huge encouragement to us. We had just really kind of launched around that time, and that latte art throwdown was one of our early throwdowns when I think we were really scrambling for competitors, if I remember correctly.
Oh, yeah.
But you were very nice about the latte art that we were producing, which I'm sure was not incredible, but we've come a long way.
Oh, I'm sure it was great.
Well, we had good heart.
Yeah. So you've been in business for, officially, you have been around as a business since 2005. And that's a pretty interesting story. But I wonder, first, how did you get so into coffee that you decided to open a business? Like, what was that journey for you to be like, I just started loving coffee and let's do this forever?
Well, I actually think that's kind of not my story.
Oh.
As much as I love coffee, that was not actually what drew me into wanting to start the business. I think the love of coffee was something that's evolved and come in later for me, actually. So what really started for me, which is a funny start, is the fact that my husband and I had gotten involved with working with youth in our congregation. So we were working with junior high and senior high, and then eventually with college students, and then even young families. But I didn't really know a lot about working with young people, and so I kind of did the only thing I knew how to do with them, which was I fed them. So we opened up our house, and we just started having a regular mealtime together. And, we sort of had this open door policy at our house, literally for years, that anybody that came, we just had a communal table, and we would just feed them and talk. And spend time with them. And through that process, I learned a lot and I saw a lot. And I really came to understand kind of like what the next generation was really looking for. And it really had to do with community. And I ended up doing actually a lot of research about this subject and, sort of realized that, a lot of the things that maybe I know I grew up with, probably you grew up with, Chris, sort of those community hubs that brought us into some sense of belonging to where we grew up. Really, over the years, I think the models in the suburbs had sort of stripped those away. And so plazas and, malls and really weren't conducive to what, maybe I had growing up and you had growing up. And so that really was, I guess, more of the motivator for us launching Joe Bean was to kind of rebuild a community hub right here in our own suburban environment.
What made you want to do a coffee shop as a vehicle for that?
That really came out of the kids, I guess, that I was working with. That was what they saw. That was really the thing that they kind of gathered around was coffee. So in conversations with them as to what it would look like and, what would be attractive to them, coffee was really what they brought up. And so that, and that in combination with the fact that at some point in this whole process, as we were sort of investigating it, a coffee shop actually opened up in our right around the corner from where my husband and I live. And that was sort of, we took it as the sign of what we were supposed to do. And so we ended up kind of taking it over and bringing a lot of those young people on to our team initially to work with us, including my business partner, Dina. She actually was one of my college students for years, and then eventually she became my business partner. So
you started this coffee shop. I mean, what did the process of starting it look like? I mean, there's a point at which you decide, yes, we're going to do this. And then you kind of look at each other and say, now what? I mean, what were the steps that were involved for you all?
Sure. So, well, like I said, there was a space already available and we decided that we would take it over. We met sort of the previous owner. And, these are all those things, Chris, that you should never do. Never take over a coffee shop that's closing, just FYI. We did a lot of things wrong before we did anything right, and that was clearly one of them. But we didn't know. We thought, what a great idea. It's already got a lot of the equipment and a lot of the things there. But, it was closing for a reason. So, we didn't sort of put all that together.
Oh, no.
But, yeah. And then she really, the previous owner really kind of navigated us into, this is what a coffee shop looks like. And so we did very traditional stuff. We did flavored coffees and, mocha lattes and pastries and had couches and, really what you would expect a sort of early 2000 coffee shop, I guess, to look like.
Oh, sure.
And and the original idea was that Dina was actually going to run the day-to-day process and that I really would kind of be more of the silent partner, a little bit more of the, the backing, part of it and guidance. But as we launched, as in everything, you have no idea what you're really getting into. And, of course, it was just so much more complicated than we ever thought it was going to be. And so much more involved. And, really probably 3 or 4 months into it, I realized that I needed to be there just as much as she did in order to kind of get this thing off the ground.
What is it that was evident? What was the thing that made it most evident to you that first you needed to spend more time there, but also not that it was buyer's remorse right away, I imagine, but there's some significant challenges that would cause you to say, maybe you shouldn't take over an existing business that closed. Like what were some of those signs for you?
Well, it didn't have great parking. It didn't have a lot of visibility. Those were some of the challenges. We didn't have a drive-through. We were in suburban, a suburban community, and we didn't have some of the things that I think, would make us more successful. But, that said, we actually did launch pretty well. I mean, we were busy, and I think because of our already, we were pretty active in the community. I especially was pretty well known already in the community, just for some of my work with some of the youth and things like that. And so, we did have some success, early on. So I think my initial, wanting to get involved in the business was not a bad thing. It came more of out of helping out because we were actually busy.
Mm.
But really within the first year, that we were open and, we were starting to do our thing and, really starting to, get some traction. Both Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks, actually came in. One came in right around the corner from me and the other one came in right down the street.
Oh.
Yeah. And, we were on a track to do, well, not maybe a multi-million-dollar company, but certainly, on our way. And then those things came in and, honestly, they just have every advantage. They have, the right locations. They have multi-million-dollar advertising, budgets. They have everything that we don't have. And even though we had the love of the community, we had the support of the community, the reality was, trying to go against, those chains, was never really going to work. And, a few years into it, a few painful years, into that process, we really came to that place.
Is it partially, and this is an assumption on my part, but it sounds like the kind of menu that you launched with is very similar to the type of menu that, both a Dunkin' Donuts or a Starbucks would have.
Absolutely. There was no differentiation and, there was nothing, we had the same beverage menu. We had kind of the same pastry menu. So that is absolutely right, Chris. And that is one of the things we learned along the way, that if you are going to compete, you have to decide how, to compete against these things because, even though we didn't necessarily lose customers, if they were going to the drive-through 3-4 times a week and then coming to you once when they used to come to you 3-4 times a week, you just can't, as a small business, we just couldn't sustain that. So
that's going to hurt. And it must have just come as a slow wave of realization of what's happening. Did it all happen all at once?
No. There's a business principle I like to always quote, that says, slow death or radical change. And we were certainly in slow death. And, we were recognizing it day to day. You begin to realize that, things aren't going well, but you have this hope that tomorrow will be better, or, you just don't see it all at once. And so it takes a while to recognize that you have to do radical change, when you're in that.
You and your company are kind of the definition of radical change, and it kind of started there in those moments. What is it that, precipitated the change that you all made? Because obviously you're here today and thriving, but what precipitated the change that was necessary for that to happen?
Well, a whole series of stuff, honestly, kind of happened. So the first was that we had to face it. And so, I remember that day we had that painful meeting of myself and my business partner, Dina, and our husbands. And, we looked at the numbers and we looked at what was going on and we said, we called it. We said, that's kind of it. We can't keep going. We don't see how things are going to change. And so, we made a decision to end the business.
Wow.
Yeah. With, everything that comes with that. It was kind of a sad day for us, but, I think the timing was interesting, for us because, it just so happened that right after, we made that decision, we had set a date, which was like a month out. And, it just so happened that Dina and I had set up a women's retreat that we were going to go on that weekend. And I can't even tell you what all transpired for us on that weekend, but we got there and I think it was just being able to step away from it and spend time together and kind of remember what it was that we loved and what we were trying to reach for. and why we were doing what we were doing. I think sometimes when you're in the day-to-day operations and it's not going very well, you just want to call it. But
Sure.
I think stepping away from it and kind of coming back to that, like, we love it. Why do we love it? And by the end of the weekend, we just felt different, even though nothing had really changed. And then as sort of fate would have it, we got back and we were approached very quickly by a local businessman whose daughter, his high school daughter, was actually one of our regulars, and she had caught wind of the fact that we were about to close, and he just asked us a really simple question. He said, what would it take to get you to stay in business or to relaunch your company? And that question really launched a whole series of stuff for us. I remember Dina and I made a list of what would it take? What would that look like? And, one of the things that we said is that we would have to have a product. We would have to be a roaster first and foremost. We would have to learn how to differentiate ourselves. And then, we would have to learn about coffee, really learn about coffee. We would have to figure out what we absolutely did not know. And that sort of brought us through a whole 2 or 3 years really of exploration and research in order to kind of come back around to where we wanted to reopen again.
So you were closed for 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, we actually had what we call sort of our 3-year hiatus where we were working on the business. And another thing to mention in that, which was a huge difference for us and in our little list that we made, one of the things we asked for was Ben, which was my son, was actually in culinary school at the time. And he had worked for us when he was in high school. And then, he graduated and went on to college and was in culinary school. And I remember just thinking he has something. He was so passionate about coffee, even though we weren't even doing coffee the way we are doing it now. And he just loves research and he has a great mind for all of this. And we just knew that he would kind of be a catalyst for change and that he would end up seeing things that maybe Dina and I would never see. And that's honestly exactly what happened, that he ended up coming in and, brought all these radical, what I considered radical ideas on what we really needed to do to get Joe Bean to where it is now.
So let's remain here where you're learning about coffee. Let's go back to where you're learning about coffee. I mean, it's one thing to say, let's learn about coffee. It's another to know where to look. Where did you end up going and what did you end up doing to really kind of turn the ship around in terms of your own foundational understanding of coffee?
So several things. I remember one of the first things we did was that we heard about the Coffee Fest, which happens several places in the country. And we went to one in Atlanta. And the first speaker gets up there and it's this young guy, again, probably the age of my son at the time. And Chris, he just started rattling off all these things about, coffee. And I realized that he knew way more than I ever knew. And I was a little honest that, he was probably 22 and he just understood all of this stuff. And so we just beelined for him after the class and said, how do you do this? And he gave us lots of resources. The Specialty Coffee Association, of course, became one of our staples. I think I listened to everything that I could get my hands on, every teaching. If they had a whole bunch of publications that they had put out there from the conferences. And so we just started listening to them and taking notes. And then, Ithaca, we went to our first barista competition in Ithaca right around that season. And I remember it because I remember you were actually one of the competitors at that event.
Indeed, I was, yes.
Yes, you were. And it blew our minds. We had never seen anything like this. We didn't even know this existed, barista competitions and, people looking at coffee as a culinary experience was amazing, like completely amazing. And after that, then we started looking for barista competitions. We started looking for comp that we, could go to. Of course, we went to the SEAA conference. Again, anything that we thought would bring us information that we needed in order to kind of relaunch ourselves.
It sounds like this was like both extraordinarily exciting and also fits in the wheelhouse of what Ben had already been learning in culinary school.
Absolutely. And again, it was interesting to have him in the mix because I really sort of give him a lot of credit for steering the boat on this. He would bring all these things to us and say, do you know they have barista competitions? And I said, I have no idea. And then he would tell us where they were. And then, of course, we would all travel down and go see them. So yeah, exactly. He was super motivated to learn about third wave coffee or just learn about the coffee industry. And he would bring it to us. And really, Dina and I went back to school in many ways for that, sort of period of time. And of course, in the midst of that, we did end up buying a roaster. So we were also learning how to roast. We went down to Ambex, spent some time down there with the owner of the company. And, we're learning how to use the equipment and just all about roasting. So it really was a full immersion into the world of coffee for us.
Awesome. Great. Full immersion. Just like, you were like right in the middle of the clever dripper.
Pour over. This was a full immersion. Yes.
So now you guys started this journey of research and just changing the lens that you view coffee through. And after that 3-year hiatus came a time where now we have to put this in a coffee shop. I'm imagining that's what, obviously it's all leading up to that. So what was it like to take all of that and then put it into Joe Bean version 2?
Exciting and terrifying, all at the same time. I think for Ben, it was probably incredibly exciting. I think for me, it was probably a little bit terrifying, just because, failure. I think when you have had sort of one failure under your belt, it's a hard thing to jump back in and decide to do it all over again. And what if we were to land back here again? What if it doesn't work? What if this is not enough? Or we're all sort of the fears, I guess, that I wrestled with personally. And I remember at one point, Dina and I kind of looked at each other and I said, enough. Like we can't second guess it anymore. I said, if we're in, we're in. If we're out, we're out. And we have to decide if this is for us, then we're 100% in it, and if it's not, then we don't do it at all. And that was kind of the end of it. It was like, we're going to settle it. And, then we were in. And I think the super encouraging thing for us when we did sort of relaunch back into, a new location, we chose the city this time and not the suburbs. And, completely different. As much as I love the community that, I live in, as much as I love the suburb that I live in, being in the urban environment was just radically different from the very beginning. People were excited about what we were doing, and they were making they were purposeful about coming and supporting us and really launching what we were getting ready to launch.
Was it a lot of new customers hearing that a new coffee bar was coming to town, or do you have a lot of folks that had already known about Joe Bean that just came back around to support? What was the demographic that was your main customer base when you first launched?
We had some support from sort of our prior customer base. A lot of them were college students, and so we certainly had that. And they had a lot of warm and fuzzy feelings about Joe Bean, and we're just excited to kind of see it come back alive. So yeah, we did have that, but more so, I think what we tapped into, which was a big surprise to me, was a few other different groups. So one of the groups that we really tapped into was this group of people that understood coffee from other places, from other cities. In fact, most of our early team had lived in other cities and it had some connection with specialty coffee. And we're just waiting. It was like they just were waiting for us to do our thing. And then many of those guys became our early baristas and, kind of pioneered with us this whole new movement, if you will, in Rochester. And then from a customer standpoint, I think we were tapping into sort of that same pool, people that had lived in other places, particularly the West Coast. I had a woman call me one day early on when we first opened, and she called and she said, "Do you know what a Hario is?" That was her question. And I said, "Yes, I do."
Nice.
And she said, "Are you using it?" And I said, "Actually, yes, we are." She said, "I'll be right over." And, I think we were tapping into people that were looking for a different coffee experience. It wasn't that Rochester didn't have coffee. We have great coffee in Rochester. But the coffee experience that was maybe on the West Coast or in New York City was not there. And that is what certain customers were definitely looking for.
All right, everyone. So before we continue on talking with Kathy Turiano of Joe Bean Coffee Roasters, I wanted to take a moment to talk about our sponsor, Prima Coffee. Now, Prima is a specialty coffee equipment supplier based out of here in Louisville, Kentucky. And from their inception, they have set out to make the best coffee brewing equipment available to the general public. And their focus is on curating the best equipment for every need, from grinders to espresso machines to under-counter fridges. A lot of passion and a lot of work goes into making sure that the things that they offer on their website and through their company are solid and there's a solid support behind it. All that to say, they put a big emphasis on having the expertise to help their customers get the right gear to fit every situation. And I use them in the stores here in Louisville. I've always been pleased with the service and the quality, and I know you will too. So go to prima-coffee.com. I know you're going to have a good experience with them. And my thanks to Prima for their support of Keys to the Shop. Thank you guys. And thank you for all you do in supporting the coffee community through your work, supplying us with the tools we need to do our job well. So let's get back to our conversation now with Kathy Turiano of Joe Bean Coffee Roasters. So from 2005 to now, you started just kind of a classic coffee shop with the the mochas and et cetera, sort of, I guess we would call second wave, more or less. And
Sure.
Then, from there realized, from business going down from your neighbors at Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts, like it took a lot of business. You were going to close, you did close and did research and development in that time where you kind of got this revitalization of your business from the people around you really helping you to see that, and taking some time away really helped fuel this idea that you could start again. And now you got your team now is including your son, Ben, and your business partner, Dina, and you've got this new thing going. People are just flocking to see and support this new coffee experience in Rochester. And upstate New York was, at least at that time, definitely not a haven for amazing coffee experiences. So now, what is the vision for Joe Bean now? What is it that you all do that makes up the Joe Bean experience?
So I think we sort of have a few things that are what we stand on, I guess, our pillars, if you will. The first is really comes out of our own history. I like to think of it as sort of exploration and discovery. And I think that's so important to us personally, and it's so important to the history of our company, that idea that first we got to explore what this stuff is and discover what coffee was to us. And that was at the core of us wanting to bring this new experience of coffee to Rochester. And so, we built the bar so that our bartenders would be very interactive with the customers and talk to them and help them kind of explore the world of coffee. And eventually we went on to add, beer and food to that as well. So I love the idea of helping people kind of on that journey. And then, connections has always been at the core of the company. Clearly from the motivation of why we started it, that idea that we really truly wanted to be a place where people actually talked to one another and engaged one another. And, if you remember, we built the bar. It's a big bar in our space, and we built it in the middle of the room, so that the bartenders are actually in the middle of the room. And engagement is a big, piece of why we exist. And then, of course, hospitality and service. I strongly believe in the role of the host, or the hostess. And, I think that is what a good barista really does. I think that they host the room and, work towards making people feel comfortable in the room, making sure that experience, that food experience or that beverage experience is great for them. And then, maybe even ushering them into, trying something new. And so I think that's also a big piece of, why we exist.
So was it something that the community was kind of asking for, or that you had heard that people were really wanting, that this made you decide to offer an experience like this? Or was it just something you knew people wanted because it's what us as humans want?
Yeah, I think it's the second, Chris. I don't remember anybody really specifically saying, hey, this is a void or something that's lacking, that you guys should bring. I think it was just our own evolution and our own process that brought us to that place of saying, this is incredible. And then along the way, I think, we collected a lot of people who had that exact same experience. Like I said, originally, I think a lot of our original baristas and sort of the team that helped us launch all this stuff, I like to call them pioneers. Because I think they just love to explore and discover as much as we did. And they were really excited about bringing, really, I keep calling it a movement, because it wasn't just that we opened up a coffee place right at the time. And I think timing is everything. Right at the time that we were just opening up, it was 2011, Rochester just felt like this explosion of creativity and synergy and ideas. And we were right in there with it. Food trucks were just coming to the city. The first craft brewery opened up in the city of Rochester right at the time that we opened up. So we were collaborating like crazy with just all these brand new sort of entities in the city of Rochester. And it just felt creative and sort of explosive. And I think that alone fueled this idea of discovery and exploration that really drew in more and more people to it.
Nice. So coffee, I mean, it's a vehicle for community. It's a vehicle for a lot of things. And it can also be a vehicle that carries a lot of other offerings and other experiences. And it sounds like you all have just kind of expanded your repertoire of what you have to offer people to make them feel comfortable, feel welcome. And I want to read something from your website that I thought was really interesting. On the About Us page, just a little snippet, it says, it seems like every time we think we have arrived, some unexpected collaboration or idea shows itself, which usually opens up a whole new way of thinking.
I wrote that.
Did you?
Yeah.
It sounds like the language you've been using here.
Yeah. Well, it is how we think. I love that idea that, as you're sort of walking through business, nothing is ahead of time. You think what it's going to look like, and then as you walk it out, this unexpected thing shows itself. And I think for me, there's two parts to it. If there's people around it, and if it's something that feels like a good fit for us, then, I'm willing to look at it and see if it's part of our new sort of model.
So with all of the additions that you've put into place at Joe Bean, each one, I wonder, has its own level of risk, I bet. You do beer and wine. And there was a time where you didn't. You do food, and there was a time when you didn't. Is it that same kind of exploration that, from before that gives you the courage to try something new?
Yes, I think that is true. I also think it has to do with who's in the room. So like our decision, for example, to do beer really was fairly simple, mainly because I looked around the room at one point, and around our bar were so many beer and wine makers or distributors or just industry people. And they just seemed as interested in craft coffee as we were interested in craft beer. And our own team, our own baristas, our own roasters, were sort of delving into the similarities between the two industries, and what did that mean to us as a business, and how do we use that, I guess. And so adding beer and wine to our program really came out of our own team wanting to bring that onto our menu, and our own customers sort of asking for it. And like I said, we did a couple years of collaborations with a local brewery, Rock Brewing at the time. And we launched 4 coffee beers with those guys in a period of 2 years.
Wow.
I think just because we loved their liquid and they loved our liquid. And we just exploded with ways to bring it together. And, they would hang out at our place and we would hang out at their place. And so, being able to then have it on our bar was just as exciting for us as it was for them.
So in the process of putting it on your bar, and this could probably be the same for food. I mean, what kind of process did you go through to vet the idea, to kind of mitigate the risk of adding something that wasn't necessarily guaranteed?
Well, boy, yeah, I think for me, there was a lot of discussion about how do you become a coffee place that doesn't just have a couple of beer taps? How do you actually transform the feel of the space? Really was what we were looking to do throughout the day. And that is a whole different conversation and requires just a lot more energy because, really, if you look at even how our food menu changes throughout the day, I think our food menu and our beverage menu has a daytime feel, and then the nighttime really feels much more like a bar. And even the team itself, over time, we came to realize that we've built teams, not just around components of our business, but actually around sort of times of day. And so there really is more of a daytime team, if you will, and sort of a nighttime team. And they do function a little bit differently. And I think all of those, initially, we didn't understand maybe all of those factors, but we knew enough of them to understand that what we were about to do was a bigger decision than just, do we want to add beer?
Wow, that makes so much sense, that the people who are responsible for overseeing the field, your staff, would have a particular type of focus, and that would be necessary for them to sort of curate that culture for your customers. So I wonder, what is your structure like right now in your business? Like, first, I mean, how many employees do you have, and how is it structured? Like, who's in charge of wine and beer, and who's in charge of food and roasting? I wonder if you can give us sort of some insight into how this whole thing works.
Sure. I think we probably have a little bit of an unusual model. Early on, we tried to define ourselves. There's 3 owners. There's myself, there's Dina, who was my original business partner, and then there's Ben, who I mentioned, my son, who came into the business and then became an owner as well. And so, we tried to be a little bit more cut and dry as far as some of our titles, and we realized it just didn't work. And so we came to a place where we decided that Dina, we call her director of operations, and the way we define that is anything that moves around is sort of under her charge. So, for example, she kind of oversees production and wholesale, so orders coming in and orders going out. She oversees sort of the bar team and the in and out of the day-to-day operations, like the actual scheduling of the team itself, and just making sure that there's product on at the bar and ready to be used, and all of that. Ben really had his head, and has always had his head in product, and so we call him director of product, and that really is right now he oversees all of our green bean purchasing. He oversees quality control, any kind of new product development that we do, such as we just launched a nitro cold brew program. So not only does he develop it, but then he makes sure that it goes onto the bar well. His head has always been around making sure that everything that we serve is, at a certain standard. And so, again, sort of surrounding product. And then he also oversees a lot of the beer. He oversees the beer menu, the wine program, and then the kitchen as well. But we have so many other staff that, really take huge parts of that. We have our head roaster, Janine. We have a bar manager, Adam, our chef, Kristen, which we hired a few years ago. We have a beer manager, Jim, and then, of course, we have a wholesale director, Katie, as well.
Wow, so this is a definite change from the version 1 staff.
Yeah, it's a huge change from version 1. I actually, you sent me a list of questions, and I was looking at one of the questions, and one of them said something about, what are you sad that, changed, or was there something about, what changed that made you sad, between sort of Joe Bean 1 and Joe Bean 2. Mm-hmm. And I realized that, in Joe Bean 1, I was, sort of everything. I was behind the bar, and, I was in the kitchen, and, I was in the day-to-day of all of that. And it was great. I mean, there was a lot of stuff I love about it. I'm a real people person. So for me, it's great to engage people. I love being at the bar. But, my whole intent, for starting Joe Bean way back when, the whole motivation, of course, was to kind of service this next generation, if you will. And so we were doing all of this stuff, to sort of serve the next generation and draw them in. And you know what, Chris, along the way, it's been this radical shift. I realized that the one thing that they really wanted to do was to actually do it themselves and not to necessarily be served by others. And so, when I look now at our team, they're 10 or 20 years younger than me. And these are, this is the team. And, we really brought people in sort of early on into Joe Bean 2 and said, what do you see? And how do you want to build this thing that will not just impact us as a business, but will impact the city of Rochester? And so, again, it was just very synergistic. It just had a lot of collaboration feel, between the whole team as to what the beer program would look like, or what the kitchen would look like, or our roasting offerings or anything. And it really is, I think it has a lot of their feel.
So in the process of having to change the way that you see yourself in the business, you can't really go through business. They say that, relationships and business, or work rather, are two of the places in society that really challenge you personally the most. How have you changed for the better through this whole process up until now?
I work with family, so which it involves just a whole. There's a whole bunch of challenges, I think, when it comes to working with family, and I think most times when people say that, it's a couple, a husband and a wife that work together. Mm-hmm. I think it's a little unusual that it's myself and my son. And, he has very strong opinions. And I think early on, like I said, he brought so much vision to the table and so many really radical ideas as to where we could bring the business, or where we should bring the business. And it was, I had to really learn how to listen and how to see what was there, and how to not just dismiss it. I guess, sometimes when you're the older one in the group, it's easy to say, well, you just don't understand, or you just don't see it, or, your idea is good, but, not for now. And although some of those things are valid, overall, I really realized this idea of partnering with the next generation is requires it is humbling, that they would have something that you don't have. And yet, if you open yourself up to understanding what it is, it's a huge benefit.
So kind of delegating and kind of handing the vision off, holding things with an open hand, helps the business thrive. And certainly I think you and I both have seen business owners and in businesses where there's like a death grip on control. And sometimes, and I feel like maybe most of the time, that doesn't work out that well. It maybe constricts people's excitement as employees, and having excitement behind the bar and in your work really translates over to the customer's experience too.
Absolutely. I read somewhere a long time ago that, every employee is actually a volunteer. And, they don't have to be there. And they certainly don't have to also be an advocate for your business. And yet, if you do treat them in such a way that they are not, just that employee, but instead they really are part of your team, then it gives them opportunity to decide to be there and to decide how much they're going to immerse themselves into it. And I do think that of course trickles over to the customer experience. We're so dependent on, our team being an advocate for Joe Bean. I mean, that is, it's a big benefit for us, but it's also the very reason that we exist. We want not just the customers to have this experience, but our very own team. We want to have a team that walks away and says, my time with Joe Bean, however long or short it is, was amazing. And it brought me to this new understanding, or it, brought me this benefit that I would never have had. And, one of the things that is truly one of my absolute favorite things is seeing them successful. And, it's different than being successful yourself. And I think that was kind of the difference between Joe Bean 1 and Joe Bean 2, if you will. Joe Bean 1 was, how do I get successful? And to me, this second round is all about how do I make them successful? And that is so much more satisfying.
And that's such a deep and healthy perspective. Something that, like earlier in the episode here, you were talking about having your head in the day-to-day and not being able to see with great perspective. And I feel like so many of us would do well to just heed your words there, because it is one of the best ways that we can make a difference in the world, in my opinion, just like you're making a difference in your community by bettering the lives of people who go through your doors as employees, because it's a transient business and they're going to be employees maybe somewhere else, and something they learn behind the bar is going to teach them how to be a better mom or dad, or a better boss themselves in another career. It's just a real holistic way of viewing what service can do for the world and your community.
Yes. And I think, I look at, for example, we had one barista who was working for us, and, there was a season when he was considering moving, and I kind of, felt like his time with us, if you will, wasn't ready to be done yet. And I just challenged him and said, is there something else that you could be working on that would actually fulfill something for us, but for you as well? And out of that conversation came the understanding that he was a musician, and he ended up launching a music program for Joe Bean. We now do jazz on Thursday nights. We have Rochester has a ton of young jazz musicians. We have the Eastman School of Music there, and they were all sitting at my bar too. And many of them were his friends, and they all started talking and saying, you know what, we're really lacking a place, not just to have coffee, but a place where we can feel as musicians, that's kind of like our home base. And so he asked if he could launch a jazz program that would be kind of a home base for a lot of these students. And that's, we've been doing it now for a year and a half. And I said, by the time you do kind of leave Joe Bean, you'll have this skill and you'll have all these connections, and it will be something that you'll get to walk away with. And that makes me actually feel even better.
Oh man, it sounds like when you walk into your place, you just experience the community of people that have gone before and contributed in their legacy is just part of what we can expect when we receive, a coffee experience from Joe Bean.
Well, I hope so, Chris. I'm sort of a mom at heart, and I always tell every one of the guys that, has sort of come through our door and work for us that, once you're in for life, and once you're in the Joe Bean family, you're in the Joe Bean family for life. And, I sort of expect them to always sort of keep in touch and, at least let me know how they are, even if they move to a different state.
Yeah, just write once in a while, will you?
Every once in a while. That's all I ask. Yeah, I might have employed a little mother guilt here and there, but but overall, I really, truly just love seeing what they all bring. And I think that's what's exciting, is that being able to have so much sort of, new people coming into your team, and even your customers, coming in and recognizing that they do walk in the door with gifts and talents, and, the possibility that can come when one of those, gifts or talents, happens to be something that they can employ, with you. And what will that bring? And over the years, we've just seen so much of that sort of explode, and I love it.
How do you find people to work at Joe Bean? I mean, to be part of the Joe Bean family, I imagine there's obviously there has to be a process of hiring and finding people who fit the culture or vision, or people who can contribute to the positive evolution of such. What does that look like?
Sure. Well, what does that look like? I think it depends on the season of what it looks like. I think early on, we were looking for people who were pioneers. I use that phrase a lot. They were the people that had been kind of waiting, for the new thing, and they really wanted to just get in there and work the ground, work the ground and make it, the new thing come forth. And over time, that sort of has shifted a little bit for us as we as a business have matured a little bit. Just the very kinds of team members we look for. We look for more what I call builders, people that are a little bit more into kind of working in something that's already established, and then maybe bringing all that they have, to tweaking it or changing it or bringing more order or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But, as far as where I actually find them, I mean, honestly, I recruit everywhere. The one guy I was talking about who ended up doing our music program, I literally met him at a wedding. Him and his girlfriend were sitting at the table that my husband and I happened to be at, as guests for the wedding. And I just really liked him, and my husband liked him. And, him and I kind of eye each other when we, sort of find somebody that we like. And then, we decide, is there a place for you? And by the end of the wedding, I said, are you looking for a job?
Nice.
Because, if you ever want to be a barista or a bartender, come and see me. And a couple weeks later, he walked in my door. And I think we're always looking for who is the right team person, who fits the personality. It's not just about talent. Obviously we look for experience and we do look for talent. But I also look for that right mix because you do work with these people all the time. You're there every single day, and it does become an extension of your family, if you will. And so it's important to me that whoever we bring onto the team really is truly the right person.
Yeah, that's definitely you don't want the wrong fit for convenience. A lot of times it's tempting if you have somebody who has to move unexpectedly, or they might even quit unexpectedly. For whatever reason, it's that space on the schedule that just looms over you, and it's easy sometimes to fill that void with somebody that might have been the wrong fit. But that's kind of unfair to them as well as counterproductive for you.
Right. Absolutely.
So I wonder, what is the one piece of advice that you would give to owners out there who need encouragement, who wants to, maybe they're facing a change that they're a little bit afraid of, that they know might be a really good thing for their business, but they just need the extra push? Like, what advice would you give them from your experience?
I think facing it is probably the advice I would give, and not to be afraid of it, because I read this book called Necessary Endings, and I realize that sometimes when we look at something and we recognize that whatever it is needs to change, all we can see is that it's going to bring an ending, and endings are discouraging. Whatever it is that I have has to end. But we forget that endings are beginnings, and that if you go through the ending, you can get to the beginning, if you will. And that, that's where hope is. That really is, if you can shed whatever that old habit is, or if you can face whatever that difficulty is and you can move through it, there's sort of like new life afterwards. And that's what I think we didn't even see until we stepped away from it. All we could see was the ending. All we could see was, sort of the negative. And once we stepped away from it and looked at it, we thought, okay, now that we've sort of, made this decision, there's so many things now springing up, I guess, if you will, and so much better things, things that, I thought that I had to be the person behind the counter. I thought I had to be the person there 24/7. And instead, for me, that burden got lifted, and then I built a team. And so it's not that it's not as much work, but it's actually work I like better, than what I was doing. So I think facing it is hard, really, really hard. I think so many of us are really good at, denial, and, it's not really happening, or it's not that bad, or, whatever. But I think when we do face it, it can bring the change that really is necessary.
Well, you're certainly a great example of what can happen when you do face it. And it's just been fantastic to hear about the success of your business and the kind of change and difference you're making in your community and the people that come in as customers and people who work for you. So this has been really fantastic. What's next for Joe Bean? I know you guys just got like a parklet. That's a new thing. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that was a 3-year process. We actually are really excited about the parklet. We had this old defunct fire lane in front of our space, and probably about 3 years ago, I started asking the city if I could, what could I do to make it prettier? And right around that time, actually, we won a Good Food Award, and so we ended up in San Francisco for the ceremony out in the wharf. Yeah,
congrats.
It was a pretty big deal. We were really excited. And just walking around San Francisco, they had these little, what I called miniature parks. I didn't even know what they were. But we come back and, we did some research, as we always do, and we realized they were called parklets. And so we started pushing on the idea that, could we create this in front of our own space? And it took a lot. It was a brand new program for the city. We learned a lot of patience, what it takes to navigate stuff like that. But now the city is saying that, they've actually committed to making it a program. So it's not just that ours exists. Ours is now a pilot for a parklet program that's about to launch in Rochester sort of this year and next year. So we're really excited about that. It's just this beautiful little green space in front of our building. But besides that, I know you haven't been there in a while, Chris, but, we did a huge physical expansion of the space in the last year and a half. And we are in this big warehouse building, and the space right next to us suddenly became open, which opened up not just the space next to us, but the space sort of past that was also empty. And so now all of a sudden we have the possibility of so much more territory that we could take over. So we did build out our brand new roastery this last year. We actually got a brand new Probat, the P25. So we have a tremendously increased our capacity for roasting. So we're focused on kind of building our wholesale program now. Obviously, we built out the kitchen in the last year or so. So, for us, the physical space that we built out, now we're kind of growing into it as a company. And there's still more physical space that we can take over. We're kind of looking at the future and, possibly taking some event space, expanding our bar, and being able to really kind of expand some of the events and the music things that we do as well. So,
wow, you got a lot going on, Kathy.
I'm never bored, and I always have lots and lots of ideas, probably more ideas than I could ever launch.
I really love the idea that you're expanding within your existing space. It's a lot of people open many locations rapidly. Is there a kind of a what is the thinking behind just expanding where you are versus kind of the first option that a lot of people go for, which is like, let's open more Joe Beans? Or are you?
Well, no. At least I should say that's not in our plan. I never say totally no, because you never know what's going to happen. But I think our business philosophy is we like control. Ben is particularly really big on quality control. And so the idea of having one space with multiple parts, if you will, we have the roastery, the kitchen, the bar, and the ability to transform the space throughout the day, or kind of based on, if it's an event or if it's just day-to-day life. That to us is so much more exciting because it's all together. The team is all together. We're able to control sort of the environment, and we're just able to control the quality of what we do and how we train our team and everything. So we do like the idea of one large space. Before, I guess, the space next to us had kind of opened up. We weren't quite sure what the future held. But then that thing opened up, and honestly, it's just, if we were to eventually take all of it, it would double our actual footage, our space square footage right now. So, that's a pretty big expansion.
Well, cool. I can't wait to get back to Rochester to see all of this.
Well, we would love to have you anytime. And actually, Chris, we are thinking of doing another latte art throwdown. So,
I'll drive right up.
If you ever wanted to revise your role,
yeah, exactly.
We would love to have you. I know it's probably a little bit farther now than Syracuse, but.
Well, this has been such a sweet time hearing about this evolution of your business and all the things going on in Rochester. Just the story itself is so encouraging, and I find it inspirational. I know everyone listening probably feels the same way. So thank you so much, Kathy, for spending time today, sort of giving us this kind of jolt of encouragement from your life in the business of coffee. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Chris. You know that you and your family are very special to myself and the Joe Bean crew, and you were such a source of encouragement to us when we first opened up, and we could not thank you enough for all that you did when we were just sort of trying to figure out our way. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, everybody. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that conversation I had with Cathy all those years ago, back in basically 2018. It was January 2019. And again, I will say, listen to episode 207. It's going to be linked in the show notes, where Cathy came back in 2020 to have another conversation about hope in difficult times and that next iteration of their business that they're currently living in and doing very well in Rochester. And I'm so thankful for Cathy and her example, all that she and all of the staff members who have been involved with the iterations of Joe Bean over the years has made a huge impact on the industry. And I hope that this conversation gave you some courage to take a step in the direction of something that you know you need to do, but you just needed a little bit of a nudge. And hopefully this was that for you today. So if you want any more information about Joe Bean Roasters, it is as simple as going to their website, joebeanroasters.com. And if you have any questions, comments, or feedback from me about today's episode or any other Founder Friday episode or Shift Break or whatever, feel free to email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. And if you're interested in Keys to the Shop consulting, if you are working through some kind of a crossroads in your business, whether that's starting a business or you are already operating and you've got some decisions to make and some problems that you need to work through, Keys to the Shop consulting can be a big help to you. So reach out, chris@keystotheshop.com. And with that, that is the end of our show today, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. We got some really great episodes coming up next week for our main episode and our shift break. And then we've got a special feature of live interviews that I am conducting at Coffee Fest trade show. So stay tuned for that as well. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.